Hello and welcome to Springboard Virtual University. My name is Albert Ocran, matriculating you into Ghana's foremost developmental program, bringing together the greatest minds since 2008. Springboard is brought to you by the Springboard Roshi Foundation and proudly sponsored by MTN Pulse, the Enterprise Group UMB Bank, with support from our media partners, the Multimedia Group and the Graphic Business. Today we are on our journey in our top 10, trying to explore the life principles of our guests, as well as their prescriptions for the ideal Ghana. So who's our guest for today? Dr. Naomi Adjepong is the school director of Alpha Beta Schools. And if you've been following the news, they are celebrating 35 years of quality education. Let's find out how the journey has been. She also is a board member of Emerge Leadership and the founder of Skills Up Africa. Let's find out what she's doing, as well as her work with the Africa Leadership Initiative West Africa. Naomi, good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks and congratulations to yourself and by extension the whole family.
Thank you very much.
In the context of a country trying to build generational entities, 35 years is not bad. It's a great achievement. How do you feel about it?
We're thrilled. You know, a lot of businesses don't make it to this milestone. So to be able to not just exist, but to thrive and evolve over the 35 years, we are very grateful to God for how far He's brought us. We're excited about the future.
I've had the opportunity to interact with the founders, and it's always been a very passionate, very focused outlook on what they do. Let's take a step back to the journey of the institution and how you got to be here, just for the benefit of those who may be asking what's Alpha Beta.
Sure. So Alpha Beta is based in Dansoman. It was founded by my parents, Reverend and Mrs. Adjepong, and they started this school after moving back from the UK in 1988. So as you mentioned, we're celebrating 35 years. It's been quite a journey. Started with just 6 children, and now we have over 600, but we've had thousands of students go through our doors over the last 35 years. And we've evolved, you know, from the 6 students, you know, curriculum-wise, we've continued to evolve. And during the pandemic, we actually transitioned to become a full international school. So right now, we only offer the British curriculum all the way from preschool to 6th form. But along the way, we've also evolved, you know, our mission, our vision as a school is to raise leaders of tomorrow who will be part of the solution to Africa's developmental challenges. And at some point, we took a step back and said, well, okay, it's not enough for it to just be a vision on paper. You know, the world has changed so much since 1988. How do we make sure that the young people that we are graduating from our school have the skills, the values, and even the attitude that they need to thrive in the 21st century? So in 2014, this is after I joined the company, I worked with a team to come up with a concept for a leadership program, which is like a full-time leadership program, which our young people from Form 1 to 6th form are on. And it just provides a variety of learning opportunities for them to be able to gain skills, to be able to expose themselves to different things. I think that's one of the challenges that we have in this part of the world, is sometimes our education is a bit too theoretical. We felt that it was important for students to get out there into the world of work, you know, experience what's going on out there so that they can even make informed decisions about what they want to do in the future. But the biggest thing for us is actually trying to get our students to think about how they can serve their communities, how they can create solutions for some of the challenges that we have in our communities, and even in Africa. You know, I think that for Africa to change its story, we need to look at how young people can develop the skills, you know, we've recently launched, as part of our 35th anniversary, we actually launched an additional element to our Edinkrahene leadership program, which is a STEM element, because over the last 8 years, we've had a lot of success with the program where young people have built up so much skills to the effect, when they go to university, they write back to us and say, wow, you know, all the things that we did, all our internships, you know, the community service, some of the, you know, they're doing SWOT analysis or they're doing vision boards, and they're going to university and they realize nobody else even has a CV. But these are young people, because they've been on the program for 7 years. They have a CV because they're doing internships every year. They'll have a very long CV that shows that they've worked, you know, in different spaces, and all the experience that they've gained from that, they're able to use to their advantage. And so we said, well, entrepreneurship is a big component of this. We have something at school called the student market, where students get to develop their own business from scratch, but they've also got to, do their accounting, present their accounts, pay tax. We try and make it as real as possible. But one of the things that we realize is that young people don't have the tools and the skills to be able to build solutions from scratch. So the reason why we're adding the STEM components, and we've actually just started, we've started fundraising a fund of $350,000 to try and get the facilities, like ultra modern facilities for STEM, because we recognize that the children need to be inspired from a young age to get into STEM related careers. We need so many solutions for our problems. And if the children are not being, I don't know if you know the statistic, but only less than 25% of African youth end up in STEM related careers. And the reason for this is because a lot of them are not inspired from a young age. I went to medical school, but I don't think it was because of anything I did at school. I think that a number of people will end up as doctors and engineers because maybe their parents pushed them. That wasn't the case for me, but I think that growing up, I don't remember much, at least in the first 9 years of using a science lab or even having computers in school or being able to do some coding and think, wow, I would like to do this, or doing something practical in science and thinking. But technology has moved so far. If we don't get young people interested, beyond consuming technology, being on WhatsApp and being on TikTok, etc., can they create technology? Can they create apps? Can they create software that can solve our problems?
It's interesting you mentioned this because in just the past few weeks, literally everyone on this Ideal Ghana series talks about education. So it's not just the young people, it's parents as well. Mm-hmm. Everyone seems to think we should do things differently. And if I may select a few, I had a session with Na Shoko, who tried to demonstrate how using pen tubes as pipettes and using simple experiments, even if the school is financially challenged, could teach lessons in practical ways, mm-hmm. rather than use rigid approaches to teaching and learning. Bridget Jobanuku had a similar recommendation. She wanted us to move away from passing people through systems that have been sometimes even politicized to systems that actually educate people and not just pass them through exams. Jeremiah Boabin, for instance, felt we should ban exams, written exams, because it doesn't give people a chance to do real life practical situations. So everybody seems to think something must be done differently about education. How big a part is education of our developmental journey?
A huge part. I mean, I think that it's not something that, I think it's something that we can't run away from. I'm actually quite worried about our trajectory, not just for Ghana, but for Africa, if we don't change the way that we educate young people. Because, we have, such a huge youthful population. And if we're not able to channel their energies in the right way and even think in a more practical way about what education should mean for us as a continent, I don't think that it's enough for us to be able to say, oh, well, the West is taking children through school from, nursery up to sixth form and to university. That may not be the solution for us. I mean, we have millions of young people coming up who need to eat. Perhaps we need to rethink what they actually need to work and to earn a living for themselves. But apart from anything else, I think one of the bigger issues for me is changing the mindset of young people. We're dealing with a very different generation probably to, 20, 30, 40 years ago. Their interests are different. Their level of exposure is different. We need to try and understand and appreciate what they're ready to channel their energy into so that we can channel their energies correctly. Because if we continue to think that the old ways of educating young people is going to work for us as a continent, I think that we are heading for trouble. Especially given that, the bigger challenges that lie ahead of that is that there's unemployment issues. There are not enough jobs. There are not enough, opportunities to be able to even absorb these people that we're putting through the education system. We're seeing it more and more now. We have, it's great that we've been able to provide free education till children are 18. I think that it's a great thing, but I think we still need to think one step ahead of that. So once they're done with school, what does it mean for someone to be able to earn a living for themselves, look after themselves, look after their families, and to even impact their communities as well?
I'm itching to hear your learnings, but I'm learning from this overview. And there's one thing I just thought I would ask you before I go on to your thoughts as they relate to learning, and that's about second generation leadership. So, in my other life as a pastor, I have studied the Abraham as the first generation who starts out from nothing, leaves his father's house, goes to build, or leaves the UK, comes to Ghana to build a school called Alpha Beta. Then you become like an Isaac, in quotes, who is the next generation who takes what Abraham built and then brings in new technology, digs the wells, expands what Abraham did so much that it becomes the talk of the town, makes the news headlines, etc., etc. What are the peculiarities of leading an effort that was started by a generation before you? Help us to appreciate.
Sure. There's so many aspects of that, and I'm sure people who work in family businesses can relate very well to this. Obviously, first, your family. I'm sure you can even relate to this as well, to some extent. You won't always agree on everything, even though you work with your family. But it's important to not lose focus. So where are you trying to get to as a company? Taking over second generation, it's important that you appreciate your past, where you've come from, and then it's important to cast a new vision. Because don't forget that you're coming into a situation that's already existing. There are clients there already. There are staff there already, and they all have their past experience. For them to really buy into the vision, it's important for you to cast your own vision. Don't feel that you have to walk in the same path that the people before you have walked. It's important for you to not just cast the vision, but get people to understand where you're going from here, because they know what they knew before. But where are you going from here? Where are you taking us from here? They've got to understand and appreciate and respect that for them to come on board with you as well. And it's not always an easy task, but it's important that you recognize all the things that can affect your ability to achieve that vision, and then try and work on those things individually.
I can imagine somebody saying, "So help me God," because you're running something that was started before you, and the tensions and the frictions as you try to bring on your new ideas, sometimes the crazy young ideas, vis-a-vis the experience that has built what you came to meet. Where do you find the balance? And Dr. Naomi is saying that it's about keeping your eye on the main picture of the company, remembering the past where you're coming from, and then casting new vision and direction, and then taking the people with you. Now, let's go on to what you may want to call your learnings on this journey. At least I know that you went to medical school.
I did.
And that meant that you were heading towards becoming a doctor. Then you ended up being an educator.
I did become a doctor, so I'm actually qualified. I did my house job. I worked for 1 year after I graduated. But I think the important decision for me at that point was I worked as a house officer. I'd been through medical school. I got tired of people complaining, Ghana is this, Ghana is that. And we're all sitting in England or the US or whatever, and we're saying Ghana is this and Ghana is that. And I think at that point, there was something that really wanted me to come and see what I could do to change that story.
Where were you practicing?
In the UK.
Okay.
So after my house job, I decided to move back. And of course, because we had the family business, and I'm the firstborn child as well. So I guess that sense of responsibility was also there, just to try and understand, the dynamics of the family business as well. So that's 2011. I moved back to Ghana. And it's been quite a journey, a very steep learning curve, if I should say so.
Do you miss medicine?
Not really, actually. I don't. I think for me, I've really enjoyed what I'm doing because I feel like it's impactful. Not that medicine is not impactful, but given that some of the challenges we have on the continent are difficult to solve, I think that it's something we have to start from the next generation. So I really I'm looking at how we can expand that work and get to more young people. The vision is actually beyond Alpha Beta, because Alpha Beta can only house so many students, but we're looking at how we can even extend the Dinkrahena Leadership Program to other children in other schools all over the continent, if possible.
So in the course of this journey, what would be some of the pivotal lessons you would like to share with our viewers and listeners?
Wow, there've been a lot of lessons. If I should share, some of the key ones, I'd say stay focused. I think that sometimes as a leader, there's so many things going on around you. One of the things I've learned, especially over the last few years, is in the end, everybody will act in their own best interest. So when you're leading, don't try too hard to please everybody, because you can't. You can't please everybody. Stay focused on what you're doing, on your vision, stay focused on your mission. And in the end, things will happen as they are supposed to happen.
Wow. So you're saying that people would ultimately gravitate towards what they see as their best interest. Are we selfish by nature? Or is it just a self-preservation thing?
I think it's self-preservation, because, sometimes you're bending over backwards for somebody and you're thinking that, this is what's going to make the person stay or go or whatever. But the reality is that as human beings, you don't see, eventually somebody may endure something for a long time, but in the end, they'll make a decision that is in their own best interest.
So leaders must do what they have to do and not overly bend over backwards to please people.
Absolutely.
Great. What will be your second lesson?
Second lesson, all things work together for your good.
Amen.
So you must give thanks in all things. Sometimes it's easy to get discouraged when things are not going your way. I'm a Christian, so I believe that everything happens according to God's plan. So even when doors close or things don't go as you're expecting them to go, you still give thanks, Interestingly enough, over the last few years, I've become that person who, if something doesn't happen for me, I don't even get upset, because I just think, well, that must be part of God's plan. So if he's closed that door, definitely another one will open along the way.
Is it a stage of maturity or is it a stage of contentment?
I think a bit of both, because if you keep getting upset and discouraged about things that are not happening and not even counting the blessings that are happening for you, it's difficult for you to move forward. I think that if something happens, great. If it doesn't happen, then it means it's not part of God's plan. I'm definitely a big believer. And to be honest, it's made my life a lot easier because even when things fail or when people walk away or when people do things and it happens, I say, well, it must be God's plan,
Tell me a situation where before you got to this level of maturity and endurance and fortitude, tell me a situation where you felt like, have you ever felt like, Charlie, giving up? Like, is this what this is all about? Because most people celebrate 35 years of great education, your own self having come on board in 2011. That means you are looking at 12 years or so of contribution to this vision. But there surely have been times where you ask yourself, shouldn't I've just stayed in my London somewhere, done my medicine? Have you ever felt like giving up?
Oh, yes.
Tell me about it. Tell me. I know your parents are listening, but tell me.
Well, I mean, it's not even, this was for, during the pandemic. I think that I'm sure, many people saw self-preservation at its finest when the pandemic first started. It was just the most intense period of my life, because everything was hitting you at once. And it was like this big thing has happened. Nobody understood what it was. Nobody understood what the implication was. And everybody wanted to stand their ground. Nobody wanted to take the hit for it. And as a business, it was just very, very intense. And leading through that period was extremely difficult because, of course, that we got to this place where people had to do virtual learning and all the issues that had to come along with that. And, people not necessarily feeling that it was value for money and all the challenges that came with that as well. Having to maintain employees, having to maintain your infrastructure for a day that school will come back, people not having any money to even pay because their businesses were equally not running. As a leader, I'm sure I gained a few gray hairs from that, even at my young age. But it was very, very intense. It was intense not just for me, for everybody, but of course, when you're leading as well, it's having to make those decisions. Do we go virtual? And I told you that we made a major decision over the pandemic period to transition to a fully British curriculum, which was a very, very big move for us as an institution. But we had to weigh up and, make that decision and know that it was in line with the vision that we had in the longer term.
Let's go to your third lesson.
My third lesson. So I guess it relates a bit to what I've just said is keep a cool head. Keep a cool head even in stressful situations. Sometimes even sleeping on something makes a huge difference, because the tension that you feel at the time, once you've slept on it, may not be the same. But it's important, because don't forget, in an intense situation, there will be people who are all over the place. They don't know what to do. They're relying on you to make a decision. So the last thing, and of course, even from my medical background, this is very important, that in a crisis situation, you have to remain calm, because the last thing that you want to do is also start to panic. Once you panic, that's it. The whole team is gone. So that's just keep a cool head. Talk to people if you have to, weigh up your options and try and make a decision in your best interest, or in the best interest of the company.
Because in your lexicon, ultimately, everyone will act in their best interest. Number 4.
So number 4, aim for excellence in what you're doing. Don't focus on what other people are doing. I think sometimes the tendency is, but these people are doing this and these people are doing that. And sometimes people can say, but these people are doing. I said, don't worry about what they are doing. Let's focus on what we are doing. Let's focus on providing the most excellent service that we can, and forget about the rest. If you provide, if you know a luxury car, nobody will have to convince you to buy a Mercedes or to buy a BMW. The work speaks for itself. And I think that in any industry that you're in, aim for excellence.
So it's Alpha Beta and Mercedes or BMW?
I'll let you decide.
Do you find that sometimes when there are setbacks in service delivery, you look at yourself and say, Charlie, what I'm promising, is it being delivered on location?
100%, but I don't think that's not unique to us.
Tell me about how you deal with such situations where there are significant variations to the promise the leader makes and the execution of your staff.
So you have to deal. So first of all, you got to try and create a bit of a structure where you're able to evaluate as you go along. But your customer is a priority. If a client comes in and makes a complaint about something, you just have to apologize and try and improve it. It's not about trying to cover it up, or because you're working with human beings. In as much as you have a vision that you have promoted or proposed to people, you're working with human beings, and it's not always going to be 100%. But you need to, if you're pursuing excellence, if you get it wrong, you just have to go back to the drawing board and then figure out, and sometimes you have scale issues. So sometimes you've done something which worked when there was a smaller number. But when you have a bigger number, then you start having scale issues. Then you've got to take it back again to the drawing board and say, okay, fine. How can we do this better to be able to achieve the aim?
I like asking why. When you mention scale, what's one of the biggest challenges of moving from a small school to a big school?
Oh, well, the problems are all multiplied. You have more staff, you have more clients, you have more children. You need, sometimes your model even has to change. So I mentioned that we started the Dinkrahina Leadership Program in 2014. We started with just one class. Now we have 10 times the number of students. So we've had to remodel a lot of the things to be able to get the same. And we're still continuing to remodel. When you have more students, sometimes your cost escalates beyond the number of, of students that you have. So then you've got to start rethinking and saying, okay, fine, what are the alternatives that we can use, or do we fundraise beyond education everywhere in the world? It's a social business, so it's not always, you don't get money from government, you don't get, so essentially what you're collecting is what you have to use to build, what you have to use to do everything. And I think that a lot of the time people don't quite appreciate the difficulties involved with that. So you have, even Harvard raises money because the fees they collect would not be enough to do all the stuff that they're doing. So you've got to innovate, and you've got to make sure that if your models are not working, you go back, you take them back to the drawing board. Get experts in if you have to.
I was recently doing a training for a number of leaders of small schools.
Okay.
And so in asking you the biggest issue with scale, I was hoping that a few of them are listening and can learn from somebody who's handling a bigger school to find out the transitional issues. But you mentioned also the fact that your stakeholders may not always be 100% satisfied. How critical is stakeholder engagement in what you do, education? Because I can imagine that you have parents, the students, parents and guardians, the students. There's the umbrella bodies, the NAT, and so on. Then there's the government. How do you find the balance?
It's not always easy. It's not always easy. It's important to engage your stakeholders as much as you can, collect feedback. So that's something that we've had to try and improve, over the years, try and collect feedback. Sometimes it's a difficult balance between, what all your stakeholders want and what you are trying to achieve as well as an institution. You hope that there are very few instances of tension, but of course these happen and you just have to try and resolve them as best as you can. You are serving a customer. As a private school, you're serving a customer. So a lot of the time, like I've mentioned to you before, if what you're offering, there are issues, you maintain some kind of an open door policy and try and help as much as you can. But of course, it's not going to be 100%. There will be times where you cannot please a client because what they're asking for is not something that you're in a position to do.
Who's your principal client?
I think the students, but of course, they are not paying for the service themselves, so their parents are also
a close second.
A close second, yeah.
Springboard Virtual University, my guest, Dr. Naomi Adjepong, school director at Alpha Beta Schools, helping us to appreciate the 35-year journey of the school, but even more importantly, her own learnings. And I'm excited about this Adinkra because it speaks to some of the innovations that different leaders have mentioned on this program in their quest to see a better Ghana, which we'll touch base with after the break. But your point number one is stay focused. Number two, all things work together for your good. Number three, keep a cool head, which I'm trying to keep. And the fourth is to aim at excellence in what you are doing.
Yes.
What will be your fifth?
Stay humble and be kind to people.
Why?
So it's important to stay humble because so many things. The saying goes, pride comes before a fall. And though you are leading, it's important that you stay humble and you stay ready to learn, stay ready to listen to people, because at the point that you stop listening to other people, I think that's where you fail. So you got to stay humble, no matter how high up you think that you are, and be kind to people. Learn, people are going through a lot. The people around you, your team, your clients, people are going through a lot. So be kind, do what you can. Sometimes there's only so much you can do, but if you are in a position to do something, do it, and learn to extend grace to people.
I like the way you said the grace with a smile on your face. Extend grace. We'll go for a break. When we come back, we'll explore this Ghana that we say is our dearly beloved country. Doc left a medical practice in the UK to come and solve a Ghanaian and by extension African problem in education. So let's find out what is her ideal Ghana and how would it look like. For all you know, you may find at least one prescription we can implement immediately without the help of any multilateral agency. Please don't go away.
Well, now that we're all here, I want to start by saying what a difficult year it has been for all of us. But then there's also a lot to be grateful for. You know, like when I bumped my car into a taxi right at our junction, and the insurance company paid my claims the very same day.
And remember the surprise cash bonus we received for our funeral finance plan? That is what sponsored our trip to the beach.
And the song we sang all the way to Pram Pram. I'm also grateful that every passing year brings me closer to enjoying the retirement benefits I have contributed so much to. And how since I started working from home after the COVID pandemic, I've been taking better care of myself. Even my doctor can attest to that.
Speaking of that, I'm very grateful to the team at Transitions for giving Grandpa a befitting send-off.
Well, on a happier note, I am grateful to have found an affordable office space to rent at Advantage Place.
Enterprise, your advantage.
Welcome back to Springboard of Virtual University, brought to you by the Springboard Roadshow Foundation and proudly sponsored by the Enterprise Group, MTN Pulse, UMB Bank, with support from the Multimedia Group and the Graphic Business. My guest for today, Dr. Naomi Adjepong, has been helping us to appreciate the story of her life and by extension, the Alpha Beta schools, especially as they celebrate 35 years of providing quality education. She's been sharing about how her own passion for contributing to the continent's problems, if I may say so, drove her to leave a medical practice in the UK to come and support her parents to build a family business of Alpha Beta. And she shared 5 lessons. 1 is stay focused. 2, all things work together for your good. Number 3 is keep a cool head. I'm trying very hard to. Number 4, aim for excellence at whatever you do. And number 5, stay humble and be kind. Doc, this quest to contribute, and I like the fact that you mentioned the continent in the area of education, which you see as a very key component of our developmental effort. If I narrow down on Ghana, what would your ideal Ghana look like? What would be your first prescription in your ideal Ghana?
So I think I've spoken about this already. I think it's providing relevant education for young people. And I emphasize relevant because times have changed so much, and curriculum content hasn't quite changed at quite the same rate. We need to look at our problems contextually. What jobs do we even have available in Ghana for people to take? And probably maybe we should even work backwards on that. So that by the time young people leave, they're actually skilled enough to earn a living. Because as it stands now, there are many people who finish school and are not able to find a job or even, be able to execute a job in an acceptable manner because they just don't have the skill set to do so.
So relevant education to you is making the young people industry ready, if I may use that
Absolutely. So, soft skills, I think that, for most of us who work with people, soft skills can be a real challenge. But beyond just the actual soft skills, there's mindset as well. We tend to find, and one of the projects I'm working on with Skill Up Africa is actually looking at a youth employment accelerator because can a senior high school student who has graduated be taught practically to start somewhere and progress up the career ladder without necessarily going on to tertiary education? And it's really just, just trying to change people's minds about, how education works. I think typically, and even you'll see that a lot of young people don't want to go to school and do visual arts or home economics because the idea is if you didn't do general science or you didn't do general arts, then the rest of it is for people who they can't do any better. But actually we need to, disengage young people's minds from that. What are you passionate about? What do you want to do? And you do a course that follows in that route, not because your friends are doing general science Entrepreneurship is a big thing for Africa, not just for people to be small entrepreneurs, but getting people who will be able to create employment for other people as well. And then I spoke about STEM, and I'm very passionate about that because I think there's a lot of careers that can be found there. Now the world has opened up so much that there's a lot of remote careers. So if we can even teach young people, technology-based skills, they can sit right here in Ghana and even earn foreign currency.
Actually, that last point brings me to the fact that increasingly, maybe one solution to our unemployment is to create that person who has the ability and skills to look for a job in another country whilst still living here in Ghana.
Absolutely, and there are industries. So you go to some countries where they have call centers. So in India, I think even in Rwanda, they'll have call centers there. They've invested heavily in that infrastructure so that you're in the UK, you're calling a call center, you're talking to somebody in India. How can we create now? The skills of the future. A lot of them lie in technology, artificial intelligence. How can we leverage? And to be honest, somebody does not need to go all the way out to university to be able to do some of these things. How can we pick young people much lower down and start teaching them, how to code, how to do robotics, how to do things that they can actually get jobs in, when they grow up.
So if I understand you right, we have probably even overemphasized tertiary as the ultimate, as it were.
100%.
That's an interesting angle to this conversation.
So if I had the opportunity, so now when I meet young people, if they're doing a course that can be done part-time, I encourage them to do it part-time and work. Because the idea of going to sit in university full-time for 4 years, if you can help it, obviously some careers, you can't go to medical school and do it like that. You can't go do architecture. But for the courses that can be done part-time, and I have a number of young people I work with who do weekend school or evening school, and they work, and because so somebody's done a 4-year degree, but by the time they finish, they have so many other skills as well, and that's something that I think that in this day and age, a lot of young people should consider.
Not everyone needs to go to university, and those are the thoughts of Dr. Naomi Adjepong. In my own words, you don't have to, and that's quite radical. What's your point number 2?
So point number 2 is we found ourselves in a situation where the government is struggling to pay its expenses, if I should put it that way. And so many times we see that there are a lot of government employees who may not necessarily be engaged in productive means. I think that is something that needs to be remodeled entirely, because there's a lot of roles that are being done that can be done, by fewer people, or technology can be used to reduce the number of people required to do it. And I think that there needs to be a rethink of how many people need to be in some of these roles, because it will drastically reduce the bills for the government, especially at this point. So that would be one of my prescriptions.
Have you heard of the TUC?
I have.
You will be very unpopular at the TUC.
I know. But that's why I said let's rethink. And rethink doesn't necessarily mean people should be out of a job. I think that if we can get people into more productive means, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's IT related, but something that will actually bring money in, I think that will help us as a nation as well.
What will be a third one?
Third one would be environment. I think that in this part of the world, especially because we're always thinking about our daily bread, sometimes it's something that we put on the back burner. But I think that it's important for us to think about the ways in which we degrade our environment. This conversation is a global conversation, and I think that it's time for us to also start thinking about ways, whether it's through recycling, whether it's, of course, we've had the big conversations around illegal mining and the water body contamination, but it's important for us to take intentional steps to make sure that in 5, 10, 15, 50 years time, we still have a Ghana to speak of.
One interesting prescription on environment was by Bridget Jobeniku, who suggested that we should have competition. She says Ghanaians are very competitive, from national science and maths quiz to everything. We like to compete. So she's saying if it was the case, if there were inter-district and regional competitions on sanitation, people will raise the money to keep their regions clean just to win. What do you think?
Well, it's worth trying. It's definitely worth trying. I think I've seen that there's a big recycling plant around Kolebo, but I think that one of the bigger issues is we need to get our society to a place where people separate their waste, because that's where, if we're able to separate the waste, it makes it a lot easier to recycle. But some intentionality, I think, has to go into, okay, as a country, what are the things? There are some things that are easier to do than others. What are the lowest hanging fruits, and how can we explore those options?
Let's go to your fourth prescription.
Fourth prescription, develop a tourism industry. I think that Ghana has benefited in more recent years, the campaigns that have happened over the last 2 years, Beyond the Return, and I can't remember what the first one was called, Year of Return and Beyond the Return, have been great campaigns. And I think that they've definitely piqued people's interest in coming to Ghana, particularly in December. But I think that we need to leverage on that a bit more and think about, how we can create Ghana as a tourist industry, as a tourist destination throughout the year. How do we look at? We have so much here. A lot of them are quite spread quite far across the country. So even just creating ways for people to get from one place to another, making sure that we sort out hospitality, whether it's washrooms, whether it's other things that people can do. I've been to countries that have a lot less than us and make a lot more money from tourism, from virtually nothing. Whenever I go, I get sad because I think, but Ghana has so much more than this. Just putting a bit of intentionality around how we promote tourism, not just in Accra, but throughout the country. And it will create so many jobs for us. If people come in, foreign exchange as well. Young people, I'm still going back to my young people, because we need to create employment for young people. I think that that's one of the avenues that we can use for that as well.
Would you call youth unemployment the biggest problem in Africa?
I think it's getting to be a big problem because of the number. I think it's a volume thing. I worry particularly about our security as a country and as a continent, because the more young people you have who you're not able to channel their energy in the right way, is going to become hugely problematic. Crime rates, and now people are getting more sophisticated with the crime. So, because once they've gone to school, a little bit more as well, it's a worry. It's a huge worry for me, because if we're not able to engage them in a productive way, I don't know what's going to happen.
So, Doc, we have providing relevant education for young people. That's your prescription number one. Mm-hmm. Number two, remodel government employment, especially in the light of high cost of salaries. And I said that TUC will come after you for that one. And you say it's not really losing jobs. It's about rethinking how we employ people and what we need for every role. The third is about environment. We need to protect our environment. And the fourth is about developing our tourism. I like the idea of all year round and all nation round tourism. What will be your fifth prescription?
Well, so I'll bring my fifth prescription now to the community level. I'm sure we all know how difficult it is to get the services that we need at a community level. Sometimes you wonder, you pay your property rates and you come and there's so many things that should be done that are not done. I think that perhaps one of the ways that we could get our municipal assemblies to deliver what they're supposed to deliver, but maybe we have to think about whether to vote in their leadership as well, because even as citizens, a lot of the time we're not aware of what they are supposed to do for us. We see problems, we don't even know who is responsible for that problem. Is it a highway issue? Is it a municipal assembly issue? I think there needs to be more public education, particularly around what to expect from our district assemblies or our municipal assemblies. Who to go to if we have a complaint. And even I like the idea of even being able to rally around the community to solve some of the problems without necessarily having to heavily rely on the government to solve everything. There can be community initiatives that are brought up, maybe coordinated, let me put it, by the assembly, but maybe even done by individuals themselves. To see how we can improve, whether it's around sanitation, it's around the roads, it's around security and safety, lighting, I think that with some collaboration and coordination with members of the community. And I say community like everywhere, so not just even in Accra, where we're having issues, how do we report issues, who do we go to, how is the assembly evaluated against what they are supposed to do. I think that it will make a huge difference because it decentralizes, so if I have problems in Dansoman, then I know who I go to and I know who's responsible for doing it without necessarily always blaming the government for things that haven't been done.
Doc, you left your work outside the country to come and work here. Many young people are doing the reverse. Mm-hmm. They think they are tired of this country and want to go outside. Not necessarily because they have something to do. Some, yes, but others too, just anywhere. It's almost like ABG, anywhere banana. What would you say to that?
It's a tough question.
The first one is
That's the first one is So I think I mentioned to you before, in the end, everybody will make a decision in their own best interest. And I still stand by that because there are definitely opportunities. There are opportunities everywhere, but for some people, they may not feel that the opportunities are here. And if it becomes difficult to convince such a person.
When you talk to the young people, what do they tell you? You are a mentor. You deal with them on a day-by-day basis.
Yes.
And you, in your regular work, you deal with young people.
I do.
What do they see?
So I think what's happening over time is people are losing hope, and just when you think you're making strides, then something else happens. And people just think, okay, the better tomorrow, when is it coming? Because it just feels sometimes like we're going, slowly deeper and deeper into a very unknown place. For me, I try to keep the hope alive and try to, stay passionate towards the cause because there are a lot of young people in Ghana and in the continent who need to be supported for the continent to lift itself out of where it is. So we can't give up just yet. But I don't think that there's not a one size fits all. If somebody is working a career where they genuinely cannot get a job here, it becomes very difficult for you to convince them to stay.
In your earlier submission, you linked unemployment to national security. I liked that brief point you made. Would you like to speak to it?
So if people can't afford to eat, they can't afford to make a living, no matter how hard they try. Because I think that as Ghanaians, a lot of people work hard. I don't think it's for lack of trying. There are a lot of people who work hard. And in some ways, it seems unfair because it's almost like the people who work the hardest make the smallest amount of money. And if people are struggling, you and I go into a supermarket and we've seen how food has increased by, over 60% over a very short space of time, and incomes haven't increased. If people can't afford to eat, then why shouldn't they steal? I think that we have to be very careful where we're headed because when it gets to a point where someone can't eat and can't survive, essentially they don't have anything to lose.
Let me zoom in on your role as a business leader. We've done a couple of conversations on coping mechanisms for entrepreneurs. And so let's take a disruption like fuel prices, food inflation, exchange rate. I wanted to use a word I wouldn't use, but instability. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, to borrow your words, your staff want more money, and rightly so. Mm-hmm. How much can you respond? And how do you cope with a situation where you genuinely want to do something but you're limited?
It's very difficult because you're coming right now. Costs are escalating all around. Operational costs, utility. Yesterday fuel and electricity went up, so everything is escalating. And for majority of industries, clients' ability to pay is also compromised. Just like during the pandemic, nobody wants to take the hits, but at some point, it's either you're sharing the hits amongst everybody. or you'll find some other innovative way to do it. But we are entering a season which is, I think we all have to be mentally prepared for, as entrepreneurs, as employees, even as clients, because you sit in what you have a hat as an entrepreneur, but you also have a hat as a client to somebody else, and I think that a lot of grace will have to be extended always, and we just pray that we come out of it quickly.
Here we are with the 10 prescriptions from Dr. Naomi Adjepong of Alpha Beta Schools. Her first 5: stay focused, all things work together for your good. Keep a cool head. Aim at excellence in whatever you do. Don't be so enamored with what others are doing. Stay with your truth and your agenda. And then the 5th one is be humble and be kind. She says people are going through a lot of things. So in dealing with them, be empathetic and be humble and kind. Now on the ideal Ghana, she says we must provide relevant education for young people. And it includes, among others, submitting that not everyone needs to go to university. We should find alternative ways to channel people into their preferred careers rather than be hung up about everybody going to tertiary education. The second prescription for an ideal Ghana is to remodel government employment, especially with the high wage bill to governments, and rethink how many people we need for each role. Third one is environment. We must protect our environment. The 4th is to develop all year round, all nation round tourism. And the last one is to look at community engagement and then engage communities to solve the problems that confront us. Dr. Japan, what will be your closing thoughts for that young person sitting there who, I watch a film, John Kill. Is it? I hope Denzel Washington. I don't watch films, once in a while I do. And he was a parent whose child didn't have insurance, and he was just about losing his job, and the child needed medical care, and he held the whole hospital hostage till his child was treated. I'm not recommending that, but what's your closing thoughts to somebody out there grappling with challenges too big for them to handle? What will you tell them? Look into camera.
A young person.
Tell them, young person, elderly person, just a word of encouragement to somebody to close.
Okay. Very simple, it's just to keep going. I think that it's important not to stop, but to keep going. If one way doesn't work, try another way. Try and, reach out to people who can help you. There's always, I always tell people, sit down and evaluate what you have available to you, whether it's resources, whether it's skills, whether it's people, and try and figure out, a way to keep moving forward. So don't give up. Just keep moving forward whatever way you can.
Simple prescription. Keep moving forward, and along the line, get help if you need help. And you'll probably find that there are people who will be available to help. Thank you so much, Dr. Naomi Adjepong, for joining us.
Thank you.
I hope it's been a good experience for you as well.
Yes, it has. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So let me say thank you to all of you for joining us in this conversation, and let's keep this debate about the top 10, especially the life lessons and the My Ideal Ghana going on social media. Let's find out which of these prescriptions and these ideas is your favorite and why. And I'm sure that we'll get some very interesting responses. But on behalf of Team Springboard, led by Comfort, and our sponsors, Enterprise Group, MTN Pulse, and UMB Bank, and our media partners, the Multimedia Group and the Graphic Business. My name is Albert Ocran, saying God bless you, and God bless you.